Welcome to the chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 75 of Chalk Talk, brought to you by the Painted Lines. I'm your host Shane Half, and you can follow me on Twitter at halfandhalf_TPL. I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've heard him on the Tough Cover radio show. It is Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at markhenryjr_. Mark, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing fantastic. As Nick Sirianni would say, what a time to be a Philadelphia sports fan.
Has there ever been, in the history of sports, a head coach who panders to his fan base as much as Nick Sirianni panders to Philadelphia fans? I love it.
People get so upset about this, and it's the same thing with Bryce Harper in baseball. A lot of the times people get on Bryce Harper's case for pandering the same way Sirianni does. I love it. Maybe I'm just
I love it too,
and I'm buying into the pander machine. But I think it's so much better than the alternative, and I think that there is probably a part of Nick Sirianni that moved here and he's like, I'm a bro. I'm gonna root for the Sixers and I'm gonna root for the Phillies. Like I think that's cool.
Yeah, I'm totally on board with it. So, all right, let's dive into the Week 5 NFL action. We will start, as we always do, with the Eagles game, and then we'll throw it around to the rest of the league. So if the Eagles are not your team, hang in there. We're going to get to everybody. We may have more to say about some than the others, as it tends to go. But we'll start off with the Eagles traveling to Arizona. They win 20-17. And this was kind of a strange game. The Eagles jump out to a 14-0 lead, and then they went cold. They allow Arizona to tie it up with about 9 minutes left. And then the Eagles went on just a 17-play, back-breaking drive that took 8 minutes off the clock, and it ended in a field goal before Kyler Murray's shenanigans cost the Cardinals, and I'm sure that we will get into that. Mark, as you watched this game, what were some of the things that stood out to you from the Eagles and the Cardinals?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of played to script a little bit on how a lot of people thought this game would go. The Cardinals were the worst first quarter team in all of the NFL. The Eagles were, I think it was the third best first quarter team and the first best first half team. So it played the script where you get up 14-0, and the Eagles, which also played the script, the Eagles let their foot off the gas a little bit every time they get up early. And obviously you get up 14-0. They were back within 14-10 by the end of the second quarter. So I don't think it was as much of a case of letting your foot off the gas and stopping being aggressive, but it's definitely something to note going forward that seems to be the MO. I know they had the 1 week of a little bit of a comeback, but we're going to dive into the specific players and kind of takes like that. But just on an overall sense of the game, I think a lot of people, I've seen a lot of negativity. And a lot of people kind of shocked that this game was close. It's the NFL. I mean, take a look around the league. Green Bay just lost in London to the Giants, and I know that they're 3-2, but there's plenty of teams. The Buffalo Bills lost 23-20 to the Dolphins in a game that they ran twice as many plays. Like, really good teams play either really close games and win, or sometimes they lose those games. The Eagles found a way to win a close game with a team on the road that, even though whatever opinions we may have about Cliff Kingsbury, whatever negative opinions that we do have about Kyler Murray's still really talented and was able to make some plays happen and got them down the field at the end of the game, obviously, before the missed field goal. This is a game where you escaped. And this is a weird analogy, and it's going to fly over Eagles fans that don't follow college football's brain. But a couple weeks ago, Clemson went to Wake Forest and went to overtime, won 51-45, and people were freaking out that Clemson was not that good this year because we saw what happened in Wake Forest and they were barely able to win in overtime. And I kind of looked at it and I was like, that's one of their toughest games of the year. It's on the road, it's a rival, and they were able to win by 6 and escape. I think that shows me something in a team that is more than just the fact that they go out there and they blow teams out a lot. They were able to win when things didn't exactly go right. They were able to win ugly, and they've shown that they've been able to win multiple ways now. And I think this Eagles team, I don't feel any lower on this team than I did going into that game.
Yeah, the biggest thing that sticks out to me as a concern is that the Eagles' offense just has no answers for the blitz other than running screens or Hurts using his legs. Now, the litany of offensive line injuries didn't help. And every time I've pointed that out, that's what people have said on Twitter. But the bigger issues are the lack of hot reads. It's the lack of a running back who can pass protect, because the Eagles certainly don't have a running back who can pass protect. Those are bigger issues, and they don't go away when Jordan Mailata comes back. And so in this game, they chose to just run so many screens. Hurts became the first player since route charting started 5 years ago to attempt more than 10 screen passes in a game. And it worked in the first half. In the second half, not so much. The Cardinals started to key in on that. But the Eagles are going to have to figure that out. That is the weakness. That's the chink in the armor for the Eagles offense, is their inability to handle blitzing so far.
Yeah, and like you said, I think that probably has more to do than anything with the offensive line going down and so many injuries going down and things changing, the communication not being there the same way that it is with the same guys week in and week out on the offensive line. But yeah, I think that, we saw it last year against Tampa. This has always kind of been the book on Jalen Hurts. And even going back to college, people would say you bring the blitz and he starts making mistakes. He starts throwing interceptions. We haven't seen a lot of that in terms of turnovers. Obviously, there was one here, but I don't walk out of this game as concerned as a lot of other people do on Jalen Hurts. And I know that the ADOT was really low. The yards per attempt, I'm pretty sure, was really low. I think that he took what they gave him, and the screens were pretty successful. And with the banged up O-line, that's what they decided to do to protect him. And I think it was more game plan than anything else. And we even heard that there were some rumors about Steichen getting upset with him for changing to runs in the second half. I think you can probably allude to that a little bit more than I can. But I think that a lot of it was just taking what they gave him. And it's funny because on the first or second drive, he was making some throws that you could argue maybe are up there among the best throws he's made as a pro, especially that one where he got hit. I think he was rolling either right or left, the closer side of the camera. And I thought that he got smoked and threw a dime 30 or 40 yards. So you probably remember what play that was specifically, but that was one of the better throws I've seen him make. He had another one of those that was really, really good. And then they kind of stopped moving the ball down the field.
Yeah, are you talking about the one where it was near the end zone, near their own end zone? It was like a 3rd and 12.
Yep.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, Arizona ran a cover 2. The Eagles ran a dagger concept. So they had, I think it was Quez Watkins, run the vertical route that the middle zone guy has to carry upfield, and it opens the dig route for Devonta Smith, and it was there. But Hurts got pressured, and so he has to roll out left. He keeps his eyes downfield, and that route, he hits it in its second window and had to flip his hips, takes the hit. Just beautiful throw. That's the best throw he made in the game, one of the better throws he's made this year. That's a franchise quarterback throw. And as well as, that last drive, the 3rd and 12 conversion to Dallas Goedert on the little sit route, and Goddard said after the game that Hurts changed that play at the line because he read out his own blitz, and so that's what you want to see, and I think that will come with time, but they're certainly not. Well, I guess you could argue throwing so many screens is making it really easy on the offensive line and Hurts, but they're going to have more answers to that. One other thing I noticed was they very rarely keep a running back in to block against these blitzes. So the Cardinals sent a lot of 5-man pressures, and the Eagles blocked with 5 one-on-one matchups, and they didn't keep anybody in to block. And that could be because they just don't trust Miles Sanders in pass protection, which is viable. He's not that good at that. It could be because they just trust Hurts' athleticism to run away from whoever gets beat. I don't know for sure, but they are making it pretty difficult on Hurts with how they're handling those things. So little things. I wasn't impressed with the offensive or the defensive game plan in this, but the Eagles walk out with the win, and a lot of teams can't say that. I mean, we can talk about the Chiefs losing to the Colts in a game that they should have won, but they didn't, and they're 4-1. We can talk about the Bills losing to the Dolphins in a game they shouldn't have, but they're 4-1. The Eagles are 5-0, and at the end of the day, that's what matters the most.
Yeah, I thought another thing that was interesting in this game was how quiet AJ Brown was. He had 3 catches for 32 yards. He had 7 targets, so pretty inefficient on his targets there. I think you can speak a little bit to who was covering him and kind of what they were doing against him and how they took him out. But it was good to see in a game where, obviously I think there was a couple week stretch there where people were thinking that maybe Jalen was locking in on Brown a little bit too much. It's good to see now. I mean, this was a game where Brown kind of got shut down and they went to Goddard and Smith almost exclusively. And both of those guys were extremely efficient with their targets. 8 catches for 9 targets for Goddard for 95 yards and 10 catches for 11 targets for 87 yards to Devonta Smith.
Yeah, I really don't know what was going on with A.J. Brown in this game. It was his lowest snap count of the season. He's been out-snapped by Devonta Smith in every game, but that gap widened quite a bit in this game. The Eagles went to a lot of 12 personnel. They were running sort of some nub tight end sets, 2 tight ends attached to the line on the same side to try to complicate some things for the Cardinals. That seemed to eat into his snaps. All 3 of his receptions, I think, came on the opening drive, or at least in the first quarter. They were all outbreaking routes. He was covered by Marco Wilson on all of them. He had targets after that. They never connected. I think 1 or 2 were batted down at the line, still charted as targets. So I don't really know what was going on there. I found it strange that in such a screen-heavy game, they were continuing to feed the ball to Devonta Smith instead of A.J. Brown, who's 225 pounds, who's hard to bring down, who is a good yards after the catch guy. It would make sense to me to get some of those targets to him, and maybe they just wanted to use him as a blocker in those situations, but Devonta Smith's a good blocker. I don't know, and I saw a clip going around on Twitter people were commenting on that showed him sitting on the bench by himself in the fourth quarter, and people were speculating that he was upset about something was going on. I'm not going to speculate based off of a 10-second clip. Sometimes a guy needs to sit somewhere to clear his head. Sometimes, whatever. You do what you need to do. I don't know how he normally sits on the bench. But it felt strange. And I'm curious if anything will come out of that. As far as I know, nothing's been said about it. But it's something worth monitoring. And maybe he's banged up and we don't know it. Maybe there's something, some nagging injury that we're not aware of that wasn't on the injury report. I really don't know, but it was a strange day, strange usage for A.J. Brown.
And then if we're going to switch over, I feel like we've talked a lot about the offense. So if we want to talk a little bit about the defense, kind of a little bit of shades of week 1 in terms of the fact that they were not able to stop the run here. I don't have the full stats in front of me in terms of how Arizona did rushing wise, but I know Connor had 9 carries for 55 yards. That's obviously over 6 yards per carry. Kyler, 4 carries for 42 yards. And the funny thing about those, if you really look at it, the long for both of those guys, James Conner's long was 17, Kyler's long was 15. That means that these guys, it's not like this is a situation where Kyler had one 30-yard run, so it's showing up as 4 carries for 42 yards. That means all 4 of those runs were pretty impactful. And same with James Conner, 9 carries for 55 yards. If the long was 17, that doesn't mean that they had 1 good run or 2 good runs. It means they were pretty consistently eating up yardage against the Eagles when they were able to get the ball. They were able to stop Eno Benjamin. Now that I'm looking a little bit here, he did score a touchdown, but and was played a factor in terms of the passing game. He's a hot fantasy pickup this week. I know Shane's not a fantasy guy, but people are a lot of Eno Benjamin talk in the streets right now on Waiver Wire Tuesday. But they were able to hold him into pretty inefficient targets and carries. James Conner did leave the game with an injury, which probably helped the Eagles a little bit, but a little concerning. Obviously, not going to play too many quarterbacks like Kyler Murray on the schedule, or even like potentially. I mean, really, there's 3 and we have 1. So it's really like, unless you play Baltimore eventually in the Super Bowl, or you play Arizona later on in the playoffs, you're not going to see another guy like that. So probably not something worth talking about. So maybe I should move on. But I thought it was interesting that they struggled with a quarterback like that.
Yeah, they only pressured Kyler on 11 of 42 dropbacks, and Kyler was getting the ball out fast, really fast. There was a lot of quick wins from the defensive line that just didn't translate into anything because the ball came out so fast. I felt like they were real concerned about keeping Kyler contained in the pocket, which they did. I think 3 of his 4 runs came on that last drive when you're obviously playing the pass tremendously. So you're happy to let the quarterback run 9 yards and slide and kill some clock.
But that's kind of why that's also why it felt so impactful, I think, because he was able to just get them right down the field at the end of the game. Because we saw it with Lamar on Sunday night. We're going to talk about that too. But when these running quarterbacks have that chance at the end of the game, it's so backbreaking. I mean, we saw it with Jalen. I mean, I'm sorry for interrupting.
Oh no, you're fine. Early in the game, the Eagles were a little more aggressive. They played a lot of cover 1 man with a spy, and it was working. And then they went into some soft spot drop zones, and it almost lost them the game. And it was like they were just so scared of the speed of Hollywood Brown and Rondale Moore. And Marquise Brown misses. He drops that one pass that probably would have been a touchdown if he brings it in. Maybe something like that is going through your mind. I didn't really understand the approach there. The defense surrendered 2 90-plus yard drives in this game. They couldn't get off the field on third downs. The tackling was really bad. And not to single out Darius Slay, but his tackling efforts were atrocious in this game. And I wonder if it's related to the forearm injury he was dealing with. So that could be something to monitor moving forward. He's never been I want to come down and hit you type of guy. But his tackling was particularly bad, and so I did wonder if there was some nagging injury issues there.
Yeah, I guess when you really break it down, there's a lot of concerns with the defense, but ultimately they gave up 17 points. I know that is a little phony because obviously you have the missed field goal at the end of the game, so maybe it's more like 20 points. But ultimately, I think there's a lot, and this is kind of my theme throughout the whole kind of breakdown of this game and why I don't have all that much to say is I think a lot of people are trying to take takeaways from this game in terms of it being concerning. I look at it a little bit different, and I say, they got out of there with a win without playing all that well. We move on to next week, and we can get into next week a little bit, but I'm definitely a lot more concerned about that game. But it doesn't have anything to do with what I saw in this game. It has to do with injuries and the opponent.
Yeah, absolutely. The final thing I want to say on this game is special teams will cost the Eagles a game.
Yep.
It's going to happen. Mm-hmm. You give up the fake punt before half. When is the last time the Eagles blocked a punt or had a punt return of more than 10 or 15 yards? Like, trying to set up a return, trying to block a punt, it does nothing for you. So just put somebody back there to fair catch the ball already and play punt safe. Like, that directly led to the Cardinals scoring 3 points. Plus, the Eagles have scored in a 2-minute drill before halftime every game this season except for this one. So it cost you at least 3 points. It also cost you the opportunity to go try to score, potentially 3 or 7 more. And so you have that. You have Britton Covey not fair catching, and he gets lit up as he's catching the ball and muffs it. Fortunately, the Eagles were able to recover. I'm done with Britton Covey as a punt returner. Just put anybody back there that will fair catch the ball and don't even try to return it. Nothing good is going to happen anyways. So, ironically, though, with a backup kicker, the Eagles' kicking game is perfect. And meanwhile, the Cardinals missed the field goal that would have tied the game. So I say special teams will cost the Eagles a game. But it was the Cardinals that it cost a game this time around.
Oh, yeah. I've been done with Britton Covey for weeks. The guy, and, you can say the fair catch thing. The funny thing is, when I watch our punt returns, I feel like there's holes. Every single time I watch, I feel like there's holes. And I watch Britton Covey consistently hit the wrong ones on these punt returns. I've seen at least 4 punt returns this year where it felt like there was a hole to be had that he just missed and didn't attack at all. So I've been done with Britton Covey for quite some time, fielding punts, and that was just kind of the cherry on the sundae. By the way, shout out Cameron Dicker. The guy kicked for what felt, how it is, Shane, with college players when they play for 5 years. It literally feels like they play for about approximately 15. And better than anybody, since he was at Texas for 5 years. Everyone knows I'm a gambling guy. So when let's say I bet on a Texas game, I can't tell you how many notifications I've gotten with C. Dicker And from watching a lot of Texas games in the last couple of years, he's been a very good kicker at Texas. It seems like all these teams, they bring in terrible kickers. Where's this guy been? Where's Cameron Dicker been? I feel like the Cardinals brought in this Amendola guy who literally lost the Chiefs that Colts game 2 weeks ago. Like, how do you look in the mirror and you're like, yeah, that's our guy? Like,
He's just hopping around losing games for everybody.
Yeah, he's the bad vibe king.
I want to steal one of your segments here before we move on.
Ooh.
We've got a Donkey Brains of the Week award for somebody
let's
here.
Go.
And it's not for Kyler Murray. It's for Cliff Kingsbury. Now, Kyler Murray, you got to know where the marker is. You can't slide short of the sticks on second down. If you're going to run there, be willing to take one hit. It's fine. You'll be okay. Be willing to take one hit and get the first down. That's what I love about Jalen Hurts. He knows when to get down. He knows when to lower the shoulder. But Cliff, dude, you're standing on the sideline. There are chains right there that aren't moving, and you are in Kyler's headset the whole time he's running up to the line of scrimmage, and you don't tell him not to spike the ball. Like, what are you doing? What does Cliff Kingsbury do on the sideline? That's just unforgivable. And, of course, they spiked the ball and then missed the field goal. So just Donkey Brains of the Week award there. It's a combination, co-MVPs there for Kyler and Cliff. But I'm putting more on Cliff. He is on the sideline. He doesn't have to get guys lined up. Literally his one job is to see if the chains are moving, and he didn't do it.
It's funny because on Saturday I gave out Donkey Brains of the Week to the combination of Nathaniel Hackett and Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson for having the donkey brains to consistently throw behind guys, and Nathaniel Hackett for not knowing that Russell Wilson is throwing behind guys and not running on 4th and 1. I think you just kind of gave out another combination donkey brains. I know you specifically handed it to Cliff Kingsbury, but I think Kyler Murray, you're at least questioning if his brains are at least like partially donkey brains. But Kyler, the unawareness of the century to not know where the first down marker is, and you said it great. Jalen is so good at that. That might be his best trait, in my opinion, is knowing where the pylon is, knowing where the yard marker is. He knows that every inch matters. Kyler sliding like that and giving yourself up before the first down, it's unbelievable. I mean, that's not what you want to see in a franchise guy. And I defend Kyler a lot of the time, but that's just, he's a little bit aloof at times, and that is a big time kind of point in that column of him being aloof. But you're right. How do you not get in his ear at some point and say, all right, wait a second, Kyler, let me check with the refs, or you check with the refs. Like, we have 24 seconds here. Like, let's not just clock it right now. Let's make sure, we can waste a couple seconds. I'd rather waste how do you not get in Kyler's ear and just say, wait. Like, just say something. Like
you run quick slants, and if you complete it, then you spike it, and you're 5 yards further down the field, whatever. If it's incomplete, it's the same thing as a spike. You're still kicking from there. So just terrible mismanagement at the end of the game.
Yeah, it's absolutely terrible. And Cliff Kingsbury, you always said he couldn't win in college with Patrick Mahomes, and now we're seeing that he can't win in the NFL without Patrick Mahomes. It's pretty obvious. But and it's funny. I've heard him mentioned for big college jobs that could potentially become available this year. And it's the same thing with, never mind. I'm going to shelf what I was just about to say for when we talk about a certain football team from Carolina.
Ooh, here, I'm going to say it for you. If I was a college team, I would rather hire Matt Rhule than Cliff Kingsbury.
I'd rather hire neither. I think I'd rather hire Cliff. But
at least Rhule was good in college. Cliff wasn't even good in college.
No, you're right, and that's a good argument. But my argument would be that I think Matt Rhule is a legitimate moron. We can get there, but the guy stinks. Like, I just don't know. It seems like the only thing he was able to do was change a culture at Temple and Baylor, and maybe he had good coordinators with him. I do know that his one coordinator at Baylor has went on to have a lot of success. Bryles, to Arkansas now, but I think that this guy is just, I think he's an idiot. Like Cliff Kingsbury, maybe he's an idiot too. I think at least Cliff Kingsbury has some ideas of a modern offense. At least like he was able to score a lot of points with Patrick Mahomes. I'm not going to argue for Cliff Kingsbury. I think the guy's not that great. I think he's a bad coach. So that's a tough one. That's a rock in a hard place. Cliff Kingsbury or Matt Rhule. But
that's a would you rather that you don't want to have to answer.
Yeah, to get the segment out of the way, I would not hire Matt Rhule if I was Nebraska or Wisconsin or any of the Arizona State, any of these teams, Auburn, that are going to be looking for a head coach. If you hire Matt Rhule, you're saying I'm fine hiring a moron.
All right, let's roll on to the Thursday night game. You mentioned Russell Wilson and Nathaniel Hackett. They go down in overtime to the Colts, 12-9. The Russell Wilson woes continue for Denver. I legitimately couldn't tell you who was the worst quarterback in this game, but I do know this. One of them was acquired for a third-round pick, and he can be cut next year for less than $1 million. The other one, the team mortgaged their future for, and the Broncos are stuck with Russell Wilson for 4 more years before they can get out of the contract, unless they want to swallow massive cap penalties. It's $107 million if they move on after this season. It goes to 85 the year after that, then 49, then 31. And so they are tied to Russell Wilson for a long time. Russell Wilson, by the way, what's his best trait? Passing downfield? 2 of 14 with 2 interceptions on throws of 10-plus air yards in this game. It tells you everything about where Denver is as a franchise, that when this game went to overtime, fans just started streaming out of the stadium. They were just done. For the Colts, Chase McLaughlin, MVP. He hit 4 field goals in this game, 3 of them from 48-plus yards. And then Matt Ryan, fumble watch, it continues. 2 more on Thursday, which makes 11 in 5 games to go along with 7 interceptions. So just a tremendously awful game all around.
If the Colts go over 500 and Matt Ryan fumbles his way to proving me wrong that Matt Ryan can quarterback a winning team, I want an asterisk, because this is nonsense that the Colts are finding ways to win these games. The Chiefs lose because of Amendola. The Broncos lose because of, their head coach. Their head coach. We just talked about head coaches being morons. Has anyone ever just seemed more unequipped to be a head coach in every facet than Nathaniel Hackett? I was wrong. I defended him after week 1.
Whispers into the microphone, Matt Rhule.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. You're right. You're absolutely right. Nathaniel Hackett, I defended him because I do think he did a good job in Jacksonville like 5 years ago with Blake Bortles. What a weird reason to defend someone. But I didn't think it was his play calling that was holding them back in week 1 and 2. I thought it was his horrible decision-making in key moments and Russell Wilson's kind of regression. But now I think we can conservatively say that his play calling is also an issue. Nathaniel Hackett's play calling is an issue. His decision-making is an issue. His ability to deal with the media is an issue. Did you see the report that Russell Wilson sat for like 4 hours outside of his locker, still dressed? He didn't get undressed from the game or take his pads off. And Nathaniel Hackett had to like talk to him for like an hour and like whisper to him in the locker room. I feel like the rest of the locker room is going to look at that and be like, what are these 2 losers doing? Like, it's like these 2 idiots cost us the game, and they're sitting here like, whispering to each other in the locker room, and he's still in his pads. Like, when Russell Wilson was in Seattle, and I did a segment on this on my radio show, and I talked about it plenty in our off season. But when Russell Wilson was in Seattle, he was their guy. They drafted him. They found him from nothing. He was a 3rd-round pick. He goes on a historic run of success with them and makes Pete Carroll kind of a legend in Seattle. And they win a Super Bowl. They go to another, and it was a great run of success. That ends, obviously. And obviously, even on his way out, there was a game last year, their last game of the year. They won 38-30, and he got cheered by Seattle fans before he left. We kind of just ignored how cringy and how lame Russell Wilson was. It came up, and Mr. Unlimited, like we made all the jokes like a little bit here and there. But now that he's out of that cocoon of crazy Seattle fandom and the people having his back and him being their guy, it really does feel like the entire football community has turned on Russell Wilson, because you're seeing him absolutely regress. He doesn't have the mobility he used to have. You brought up the deep passing. That seems to be a legitimate issue at this point, and that was his best trait, his second best trait, mobility. Like I just said, he doesn't have it. And I really do think that there are legitimate concerns with Russ. I don't think this is a slump. I think this is at this point something where we can say, I think old, prime Russ that we were all upset never won an MVP is gone, and he's going to have to figure out how to move on to the next phase of his career. And Denver, sorry about it. Like, you just, mortgaged your future. It was a terrible decision at the time. It looks even worse now. And Seattle, after all of that, they get to still kind of look back fondly on Russell Wilson years from now. But for now, they've got to feel great. If you're a Seattle fan, if you're the Seattle front office, you're doing high fives every single primetime game, which is every week. The Broncos play every week in primetime. Seattle fans and all these Seattle people have to just be like over the moon. Like, and I'm sure that there was a certain quotient, a certain, percentage of the Seattle fan base that kind of was out on this guy. And, at least like it was always like, oh, he's a great player, but man, he's so cringy. And obviously he had a lot of spats with teammates, including Sherman and Golden Tate. And there's been a lot of famous things like that. I wouldn't be surprised if this Denver team is turning on him from the inside already. And, he comes out with this fake injury after the game, after a game that he plays poorly. It's all just classic Russell Wilson. But in the past, he was protected from hearing about it. In the past, when he would leave a press conference after a terrible loss in which he cost them a game and said, Broncos country, let's ride, when he was saying that about the Seahawks and let's go 12, people didn't care as much. Now, I don't know how he, improves the Q rating. I think this might be it for Russell Wilson.
Yeah. Well, he's got at least 4 more years there in Denver, so that's going to be a brutal stretch unless they figure it out. So
and also, you brought something to light to me. I didn't know that the Colts could just get out from under Matt Ryan. That's going to be nice for their new GM and head coach next year when they both get fired, for them to be able to get out from under that.
Yeah, less than $1 million of dead money. I think it was like $800,000. So they can move on and they can use their top 5 pick if they'll quit winning games they shouldn't win to go get a quarterback.
Yeah, they're screwing themselves. It is bothering me that they're going to be a part of the conversation, and I think like people aren't going to look at the stats and people aren't going to look at anything, but people are going to be like, "Oh, Matt Ryan, like they started rough and here they are," and it's like, oh, they're averaging less than 14 points per game. Like this is a terrible offense. Like, I don't know.
All right, let's go on. Let's hop across the pond to London, where the New York Giants, in one of the shockers of the week, they knock off the Green Bay Packers 27-22. And yeah, the Packers don't have Devontae Adams, and we'll talk about him in a minute. He's a really good football player. The Giants were down their top 4 wide receivers, and they had Daniel Jones under center. And not just Daniel Jones, an injured Daniel Jones. And they win this game. Saquon Barkley has 106 yards and a touchdown. He missed some time in the game with a shoulder injury. Daniel Jones leads 3 straight scoring drives in the second half against the vaunted Packers defense. Like, the Packers blew a 17-3 lead in this game. David Bakhtiari is in a left tackle rotation now. Apparently, he only played 24 snaps. Like, get that out of here. You're either healthy enough to play or you're not. But left tackle rotations are stupid. The Giants needed overtime to beat, the Packers needed overtime last week to beat Bailey Zappi. They lost this week to the New York Giants. This is a bad football team. It's a bad football team.
Bailey Zappi. We'll get there. No, jeez.
While you cough and clear your throat there, I'm going to ask you a question to throw this to you.
Yeah.
The Giants have already matched their win total from last year. They're 4-1. Is this a playoff team in the weak NFC?
It's looking like it. I can't believe it. I'm still not buying. I still think this team probably ends up with like 8 or 9 wins, but 9-8 might get you a wild card spot. That's where we're at. 8-9 might get you a wild card spot. To be quite honest, but this was a shocking win. And the most shocking aspect of it was I think that Daniel Jones played the best game of his career. I don't know if the stats are going to back that up. And I have a Giants fan friend who, when I said that to him, he kind of pointed to a game. And I looked that game up. He had 3 turnovers in that game. In this game against Green Bay, he went 21 for 27, 217 yards, no touchdowns passing. Yeah, I don't think he's had a passing touchdown since week 2, which is a funny thing about Daniel Jones. But he also had 37 yards rushing. To me, this was a game where he made plays when it mattered, and he made plays for the Giants to come back in this game. The stats might not look that important, but when you watch the game, I thought he was, a more than competent quarterback, and that's more than I can say for any other time I've watched him ever, to be quite honest. So Saquon obviously continues to look like himself and look like the guy they stupidly drafted him to be. But more than anything, this comes down to Brian Daboll. I think Brian Daboll is the coach of the year right now, and what he's done is, he's already a top 10 coach in my eyes. And this is the type of guy where we talked about Nathaniel Hackett, we talked about Matt Rhule, these guys that are so inequipped to be NFL head coaches because they don't know what it takes. They don't know everything that goes into it. It seems like Brian Daboll knows literally everything that goes into being a head coach. And, whether that be from the fact that he was at Bama with Saban and he was on so many different NFL staffs with so many different NFL head coaches as offensive coordinators over the years, but he's just so prepared, and that he knows exactly what his philosophies are. He's not, changing with the wind like Nathaniel Hackett week to week on what he's going to do in any given situation. And he also kind of gets it. It seems like there was that video with him pumping his fists and getting fired up going off the field like he was like a quarterback, like he's Jalen Hurts, like kind of looks like what Jalen Hurts does when he's going off the field a little bit. But Brian Daboll, he has New York fired up for the first time in a long time, and I personally absolutely hate to see it. We said multiple times this offseason, especially around draft time when they made some really good picks, at least in the first round. I was terrified that with Joe Shane as GM and Brian Daboll as head coach, that they had kind of figured it out and they at least weren't incompetent. I think we now see that that's the case, and I think we now see they might be way more than incompetent. They might be an excellent GM coach pairing. I think they're currently playing way far above their talent, and I think that has to go to Brian Daboll.
Yeah. And Wink Martindale, by the way, another great addition
they
had in the offseason. But all right, let's keep it rolling here. Pittsburgh travels to Buffalo and just gets blasted, 38-3. I don't know how you can talk about anything first other than that 98-yard pass by Josh Allen to Gabe Davis. That was just absurd. He's throwing into like a 20-mile-an-hour wind from 7 yards deep in the end zone. Can't step into it, just a flick of the wrist, and he drops it in a bucket like 45 yards downfield. Just incredible alien things from Josh Allen. Buffalo in this game had 8 passing plays that were over 20 yards. Just an incredible performance as they rack up 500 yards of offense. Pittsburgh only pressured Allen 3 times, 0 sacks. They're just not the same without TJ Watt. On the flip side, Kenny Pickett gets his first start. He goes 34 of 52 for 327 yards and an interception. He was up and down. Not any worse than Mitchell Trubisky for sure. But I'll say this, it will take the best coaching job of Mike Tomlin's career to get to 500 this season. They are 1-4 right now with Tampa Bay, Miami, and Philadelphia up next.
Yeah, the Pittsburgh is in really rough shape. I bet the Steelers plus 14 in this game and quickly just threw that away and stopped paying attention to this game, especially after that 98-yard touchdown. But yeah, I'm not taking much away from this game in terms of Buffalo. I think this was one of those, the ball got rolling, and then once it got rolling, it was a blowout. And, what's going to happen is that, the Steelers weren't ready to go balls to the wall and throw all out with Kenny Pickett there. And to try to come behind and play basically catch up all game. So the Bills were able to pour it on. So I don't think that the Bills are. We'll talk about. I mean, we won't, but the Bills play the Chiefs next week, so I'll spend this time to talk about that since that's the biggest game next week by far. The Bills are a 2.5 point favorite on the road in Kansas City. I think that that is crowning Buffalo far too early, in my opinion. I know Kansas City just had a tough game with Las Vegas, but I think Kansas City being a home underdog to anybody is disrespectful to Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes. So, again, I know every time I say this, the Bills come out and make me look stupid. But I still I'm not ready to crown the Bills like everybody else seems to be. I saw on all the power rankings, everyone vaulted them above the Eagles again. Like everyone had the Eagles at 1 for a week because it felt like the sexy thing to do with them being 4-0. But now that it's losing its luster that they're still undefeated, the Bills are right back at number 1.
Yeah, definitely the game of the week. I can't wait to watch that one, as well as the Eagles-Cowboys, 2 really good games going down next week. But let's roll on to the Chargers.
As well as Bears-Commanders on Thursday.
Oh, yeah. That'll be a great one that I will not watch. Let's roll on to the Chargers at Cleveland. The Chargers win 30-28. Austin Eckler had a great game in this one. 173 yards on 16 carries with a touchdown. He also had 26 yards receiving and a touchdown. The Browns' defense, it continues to be a problem. We thought that they would be able to survive the Deshaun Watson suspension with a running game and defense. Their defense has been awful. The Chargers had the worst rushing attack in the NFL. They gained 238 yards on the ground, 465 overall. The rookie kicker, Kade York, had the highlight of his career in Week 1, beating the Panthers on the last-second field goal. It's been all downhill since. He missed 2 field goals in this one. Brandon Staley went for it on a 4th and 1 from his own 46 with 1:14 left. Next Gen Stats gave it a go by a 0.02%, so very small margin. I would have punted there. 1:14, I would have punted the ball to Jacoby Brissett and make him drive the field in 70 seconds. I think that's a pretty easy one to me. I get why the analytics have it in the middle. I would not have gone for that, but Staley chose to, and it ultimately didn't end up costing them. So,
this is such bad podcasting by me right here. I kind of get both sides. I get why you would go for it, and I also get why you punt because you're basically handing them 3 points. They got lucky. This was one of those games that I did not pay attention to. And Red Zone, I feel like surprisingly for a game that's 30-28, I had the 2 games set up at 1 o'clock with the 2 games I bet on, and one of those games we'll get to. I can't wait to talk about it, but. This was one of those games that I was only following through Red Zone, so I had 2 games on and Red Zone, and it seems like Red Zone didn't touch on this game as much as you'd think in a high-scoring game. They did the end of the game was popping on, and I was like, whoa, I had no idea that this game was this close, and then I'm like, oh, okay, the Chargers didn't get it. Cleveland's going to win the game. Obviously, not the case. These are the 2 weirdoest teams in the NFL. I can't figure out either of these teams. The Chargers, I kind of put them in the graveyard with all their injuries. They're finding ways to win while they're not healthy. Maybe that means they can get some guys back, and eventually they can kind of get back on track and be a contender. I can't figure out either of these teams, though, whatsoever. Cleveland, they could be 0-5 if you looked at their wins. They could also be 5-0 if you look at some of their losses. Jacoby Brissett makes bad plays in the clutch, it seems like, and it just seems like he's a fine backup and maybe like the 30th best quarterback in football. But when it comes down to it and it's time to make a play, he can't do it.
I've got a trivia question for you from this one. So Austin Eckler became the 4th UDFA running back to have 50 touchdowns in his career. Can you name any of the other 3?
I don't know if he played long enough. Arian Foster?
Arian Foster had 68.
Give me a hint on one of the other 2, or both of them.
One of them is much beloved by Eagles fans. This one I didn't get though because I didn't know he was undrafted. And the other one was a Chief.
I don't have it. Wait, it's not Jamal Charles?
No, not Jamal Charles. It's Priest
No.
Holmes. So Priest
Priest
Holmes had
Holmes. I should have
94,
had that.
and then LeGarrette Blunt had 58. I didn't know that LeGarrette Blunt was a
Oh,
UDFA. So
yeah, I think it was because of off field stuff with LeGarrette Blunt and him
yeah,
punching the
notably
guy.
punched a guy at
Yeah,
the Oregon Boise State game, the opener of that season, and I think he got suspended for the year. But
he actually got in a fight at a youth football game recently. LeGarrette Blunt. I saw that got tweeted out like a couple of weeks ago. So
yeah,
LeGarrette Blunt, no one fights quite as often at football games, quite as often as LeGarrette Blunt.
yeah. All right, let's roll on here. This one will probably go quicker. Houston goes to Jacksonville, beats the Jaguars 13-6. The Texans have now beaten the Jags 9 straight times. The last time the Jaguars beat the Texans was in 2017 when Trevor Lawrence was playing high school football. So maybe he can break the curse eventually. The Jags gained 422 yards of offense in this one, but they only had 6 points. They had 3 points on 3 red zone possessions. Lawrence had 2 interceptions, including one in the end zone to Derek Stingley that was just a terrible decision. And then the Jags had 3 turnover on downs. So just not much going on for the Jags. On the other side, Dameon Pierce, a guy that we were both liking in the draft, he had 99 yards and the only touchdown on the day. Per Next Gen Stats, he forced 13 missed tackles in this game, which is the most by any player this season in a game. So Dameon Pierce season in Houston.
It's funny because they won the game, but my biggest takeaway from the last couple of weeks, and I announced that I was out on them. I announced that I was renouncing my Mafia membership, but as a former member of Mills Mafia, it's just really disappointing to see what Davis Mills has become. This guy's taking no chances. He's 16 for 24 for 140 yards, putting up Josh Rosen numbers. Like, I just don't understand. This guy was taking chances last year. This guy was going down the field last year. Yeah, he was playing from behind. The Texans and Lovie Smith, this offensive playbook is just not imaginative whatsoever. Good for them that they have Dameon Pierce now, who they can give a ton of carries to, and he's actually really good. So that'll help them out a lot. But I'd like to see them let Mills throw it loose a little bit more and kind of be the guy he was last year, at least for entertainment purposes. It seems like every Texans game is just going to be unwatchable. And last year that wasn't the case. So on the other side, this isn't a game that concerns me with the Jags. You laid it out. Bad luck in the red zone. Bad luck turnover wise. Well, it's not bad luck. He made bad decisions, but they gained a ton of yards. They played better in this game. They should have won. So I'm not all that concerned. I will say one nugget: Travis Etienne got going big time in this game. Got a lot of touches, 10 carries for 71 yards. He was involved in the passing game as well. If you're going to take anything away from the game positively for the Jags, it would definitely be that he kind of finally looked like the guy we were hoping for.
Yeah. All right, rolling on. Chicago at Minnesota. Chicago loses this game 22-29. Kirk Cousins hit on his first 17 passes on the day as the Vikings scored on their first 3 drives. Then their offense just went cold. The Bears battled back. They take the lead. And then the Vikings went on a 17-play, 75-yard touchdown drive to win the game. Justin Fields had a season-high 208 passing yards, and the Bears scored on 4 straight possessions at one point to get back in the game. But the Bears just couldn't hang on. They continue to rely on a running game that's awful instead of putting the ball into Fields' hands more. And then obviously the play that seals the game, Cam Dantzler had the play of the game to end it. He gets stiff-armed into oblivion by a receiver, and then he jumps up and he strips the ball out from behind. So, you love to see that from a defender that just got embarrassed, jumps back up, gets in the play, and ultimately seals the game. And Minnesota, although I still am not convinced that they're a remotely good football team, they get the win, and they're in first place in the NFC North now.
Yeah, this was one of those games where it was like, oh, Minnesota got up 21-3. I could put this aside and not pay attention. And then you look later on, or whatever they got up early, you look later on and you're like, oh, the Bears are in this game and driving to win this game. So this is one of those games where it's just like, wait, what happened? Like, how? And then you look at it, Minnesota's offense just, when it's bad, it's terrible. It's so weird because when it's good, it's the scariest offense in football, maybe, with Cook going, with Jefferson going. At one point, it was like the second quarter, Dalvin Cook had 2 touchdowns and like 20 fantasy points, and Justin Jefferson had like 8 catches for like 120 yards or whatever it was, and like 20 fantasy points right away. It was crazy to see how explosive they were to start this game. You put it on the side, and then they just completely took their foot off the gas, and it almost cost them a game. I feel like I've seen approximately 6 Kirk Cousins games like this against the Bears and the Lions over the last couple of years. Feels like they play this game either either they're the team that gets down 21-3 and comes back and barely loses, or they get up 21-3 and barely win it. Feels like I've watched this Kirk Cousins game approximately a billion times.
Yeah. Okay, let's keep it moving here. Detroit travels to New England. They get blanked, lose 29-0. Bailey Zappi, 17 for 21 for 188 yards and a touchdown. He did have an interception via a ball that hit Nelson Aguilar right in the hands, that he bobbled right into the arms of a safety. So the Patriots did not punt the ball until the fourth quarter. The Lions coming into this game had the highest scoring offense in the NFL, and they got shut out. I feel like Bill Belichick, he does this like once a year. There's that one defensive performance that you never see coming, and then we do the whole, are the Patriots back thing, and then they're not, and it just kind of fizzles out from there. But the Lions attempted 6 fourth downs in this game, and they didn't get any of them. It's the most fourth down failures in a game since 1991. So, just crazy stat. One other thing that's just kind of crazy. Bill Belichick is now 5-0 in New England when starting a rookie quarterback drafted outside the first round for the first time. The NFL as a whole is 30-80 in those situations. Belichick's 5-0, and a lot of that is because they did so many things to make Zappi's life easier. Utilizing play action, rolling pockets, those sorts of things. I don't understand why they don't do that for Mac Jones. Like, just because the guy can process doesn't mean you can't try to make his life easier. And so hopefully, they'll reinvent themselves a little bit by the time Mac Jones comes back.
Yeah, I mean, can we just pour one out for Matt Campbell? Because a lot of people got on my case a lot of times about how wrong I am on Matt Campbell and how he's Dan Campbell. I'm talking about Iowa State's head coach, who I also think is a total fraud, by the way, Matt Campbell. That's why when I talked about frauds, my brain went right to Matt Campbell, who I bet against every single week. He's lost the last 2 weeks against Kansas State. Shout out, no one cares. But Dan Campbell, the Lions head coach, the guy's a train wreck. I've never heard someone come out and say, "Oh, that's on me," more after a game. It's like, maybe just stop making bad decisions. And at a certain point, instead of apologizing for bad decisions, just make the right ones. And he never seems to. Dan Campbell, I think he's one of the worst coaches in the NFL. It'll be really interesting to see, because the Lions are in such rebuilding mode. Are they willing to get rid of Dan Campbell and kind of restart that from the top down? Because they absolutely should be. It'll be really, really interesting to see what happens, because this Lions team is not going to figure it out. They were playing over their heads for the first couple of weeks, and they still have one of the worst records in football and are very much, I think, tied for the number 1 pick right now. So I don't think that this Lions team is going to turn it around, and I'm at this point, I'm on Dan Campbell watch in terms of him getting fired.
All right. Be interesting to see what plays out there. I still feel like he's very beloved by Lions fans, but we'll see if they continue to lose games.
What's his record now? I think he's 4-18-1. I think that's his record now.
Yeah, I'm not sure. You would think they garner a lot of goodwill for their offense, people knowing they're still a year or two away, but then you get a game like this, and that's a hard one. You can't have a lot more games like that. So we'll definitely follow that. You and I both smashed the Lions under season win total. I think it was at 4.5, 6.5. I can't remember now.
7.
I think I got it at 6.5.
Yeah, I got it at 7. That was my best bet in the column that I wrote. It was the first column I wrote at the Philly Influencer. That was like the picture. I think it was Dan Campbell or Jared Goff. It was one of them. But the Lions under 7 was my favorite bet of the preseason. And I got to tell you, I feel great about it right now.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to Seattle at New Orleans. Seattle loses this game 32-39. Somewhere Sean Payton is smiling because Taysom Hill did it again. He had 4 touchdowns on the day. And then for the Seahawks, another year, another injury for Rashad Penny, who ends his season with an ankle injury. Kenneth Walker came in, and the rookie, he had a 69-yard touchdown. He finished the day with 88 total yards, so he will be leaned on as the season progresses, which benefits my fantasy team because I have him. Not that I'm a fantasy guy, but Seattle had 400 yards of offense, and they put up 32 points in this game, and their defense just can't do anything. They've allowed 45 points to Detroit and 39 points to New Orleans in back-to-back weeks. On the season, they have allowed teams to score 11 more points against them than their average when not playing them. This defense is just so bad. So Pete Carroll, defensive mastermind, just terrible.
Yeah, I watched this game more than any other game in the 1 o'clock slate. I had the Seahawks +6, lost by.
Oh, you got muted there.
Was definitely disappointing to see the Seahawks not cover this game. Also, more importantly, was disappointing to see them not win this game for the Eagles' draft pick purposes, because there was stretches of this game where it felt like Seattle was going to come in and steal this one, and that wasn't to be. It does seem like the Saints are much better with Andy Dalton at quarterback than they were with Jameis. I think they should stick with Dalton even once Jameis is back from his injury. I don't know if they've made
I said that on Twitter, by the way, and people blew me up about it. When Jameis got hurt, I said for the Eagles draft pick's sake, I would rather see Jameis out there than Andy Dalton, and got a whole bunch of people mad at me.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Even though I don't think Andy Dalton's anything special, I think Jameis just stinks. Yeah, I think Jameis is done. But, yeah, I think that I'm not freaking out yet about the Eagles draft pick, because you take a look at the Saints defense, which is supposed to be the lifeblood of what they are. They got gashed by Geno, gave up 32, 33, whatever it
32.
ended up being, 32 to Seattle a week after giving up 28 to Minnesota and London, and giving up a last-second drive in that game to Minnesota, or a last-minute drive in that game to Minnesota, where they went right down the field. I think that the Saints' defense has regressed more than the offense has progressed. So I still think that this Saints team is going to be extremely disappointing. And then as for the other side, Seattle, it's interesting because you have to feel great if you're Seattle right now. You're, I think, a lot more competitive than you expected to be going into the year. Geno obviously is playing great, but this defense is just dreadful. Tariq Woolen has had flashes. I've heard some national praise for Tariq Woolen. But outside of that, I think that they have pretty much no talent around the defense besides him and Jordan Brooks. I think Seattle is going to continue to give up an absolute ton of points. And I think they're an auto bet on the over. You take the over in Cardinals-Seahawks games. The last 2 weeks, I think it's 71 and 93 points or something like that over the last 2 weeks. I think the over is set at 51 for Arizona-Seattle next week. Slam that over. I think this ends up being a 38-35 game where Geno and Kyler duke it out next week.
Yeah, that'll be a crazy game to watch for sure. So let's roll on. Miami at the New York Jets. Not a very good game. The Jets win 40-17, largely because Teddy Bridgewater gets hit on his first pass of the game by Sauce Gardner. By the way, called for a horrible intentional grounding in the end zone, so it was a safety, but removed from the game under the concussion protocol despite not failing a concussion test. So enter Skylar Thompson, a 7th-round rookie from Kansas State, and I can assure you, Kansas State does not run the same type of offense that the Dolphins were running for Bridgewater. Thompson took 15 hits and 2 sacks in the game. So really the only interesting thing to talk about in this game is rookie watch. Breece Hall, the running back for the Jets, had 97 rushing yards and 100 receiving yards, also on my fantasy team. He's now had 100 receiving yards in back-to-back games. And then they also have Sauce Gardner had a safety and his first interception of the year. He also has a pass breakup in every game this year. So early returns on the Jets' rookie draft class look good.
Yeah, I can't believe the Jets are 3-2. It's unbelievable. Dolphins were one of my favorite bets of the week. Teddy goes down right away. It's one of those games where the Jets win this game 40-17. And I know people are going to say, oh, well, Teddy doesn't play defense. Game flow dictates score a lot of the time. I don't think this game goes quite this way if they have Teddy in there instead of Skyler. So not much to say on this game. I'm not making any big takeaways. I'm still pretty high on the Dolphins if they're able to get to it or Teddy back.
Yeah. Okay, Atlanta at Tampa Bay. Atlanta almost pulled this one out. They lose 15-21. Tom Brady went 35 of 52 for 351 yards and a touchdown in this game, and it was check down city. Like, the Bucs had 2 11-play drives and 2 13-play drives in the first half. Leonard Fournette, renowned receiving back, right? He had 10 receptions in this game. So late in the game, they went cold, and they allowed Atlanta to battle back from down 21-0. But then the NFL stepped in and flagged Grady Jarrett for a horrible roughing the passer that would have given the Falcons the ball back, and the Bucs are able to close the game out. So the NFL and Marcus Mariota teamed up in this game to make sure that the Bucs won. Mariota finally influences the running game. He had 7 carries for 61 yards, which is good because he's terrible in the passing game. I said this last week. It's Desmond Ridder time. There's no reason not to play him at this point. Mariota is nothing. This was Brady's 23rd win in his career with 50-plus passing attempts. No other quarterback in NFL history has more than 5 wins when they've attempted 50-plus passes. So just crazy. Brady's carrying the offense right now, and the Buccaneers could get scary down the stretch if they get guys healthy again.
Yeah, I think that they're absolutely in the conversation for contenders in the NFC. They were able to sneak by this game with the help of the NFL. But, win's a win. I still think you look at the schedule for Tampa Bay, a lot of easy wins on there. I still expect them to win 11, 12-plus games and to be right in that mix for a 1 seed in the NFC and to compete to go to the Super Bowl. So once they get their guys back, there was a lot made about Tom Brady and if he looked old and obviously the personal issues he's got going on off the field. And if that would affect him, I think he looks great back there. I think he looks just as good as he did last year. The stats will come, the wins will come. And the win came this week, but the stats will come, and the guys, when they come back, will obviously make Brady look a lot better than he looks right now.
Yeah. Okay, Tennessee at Washington. Tennessee wins 21-17 as Carson Wentz throws an interception at the goal line with 6 seconds left. Tennessee held Washington to 43 rushing yards, and they sacked Wentz 3 times, hit him 7 more, and they forced 3 fumbles. Meanwhile, Derrick Henry had 132 of the Titans' 241 yards and 2 of their touchdowns. He went back-to-back weeks with 100-yard rushing games. So I think Derrick Henry's finally back. But I don't even really want to talk about the game. I want to talk about the joke that is Ron Rivera. Asked after the game, did you see this? Yeah. So asked after the game what the difference is, why the other teams in the division have gotten off to a hot start, but the Commanders haven't. What's the difference between you and them? And he gave a one-word answer: quarterback. This is the quarterback that your organization chose, and you're throwing him under the bus. Do you know who's playing quarterback for Dallas? Cooper Rush? Do you know who's playing quarterback for the New York Giants? Daniel Jones. How about you take a little bit of accountability? The difference between the Commanders and the Giants is coaching. It's not quarterback, it's coaching. The Commanders should have fired Ron Rivera today. He shouldn't have survived that comment. This is Ron Rivera knowing he's on the hot seat, looking for a scapegoat, and there's a convenient scapegoat in Carson Wentz, who is not blameless. He is very culpable in their slow start. He's very much at fault. Ron Rivera is equally at fault. Ron Rivera hasn't had a winning season since 2017. The only quarterback he has ever had a winning season with was Cam Newton. So yeah, maybe quarterback is the difference. Maybe it takes a quarterback playing at an elite level to drag Ron Rivera over 500.
Yeah, I totally agree. He's 27-39 over the last 5 years that he's coached. I think that says it all right there. He is the definition of mediocrity as a head football coach, and right now, he's not even there.
Yeah. All right. Anything else you want to throw out on that game? I feel like I just ranted my way through that one.
I'll just say Tennessee's Tennessee. The Titans are the Titans. They are exactly who they are. every single year. Everyone wanted to write them off. Everyone wanted to say this was the year that they'd stop being the Titans. But they are the Titans, and they're going to tighten. This is what they do. They look ugly early on, and we write them off, and then they're fine. And then they stack up some wins, and eventually they'll have a game or two lead in the AFC South, and we'll be like, oh, guess the Titans are going to win that division, and then that's what they're going to do. I know we got excited about Jacksonville for a minute. Everyone wanted Indy to be a thing. I even saw some Texans love in the preseason. The Titans are going to win that division, and I feel pretty confident saying that.
I thought you were about to break into song and say they are the mighty, mighty Titans.
Yeah, remember the Titans, because they're the same thing every year. You don't have to remember them.
All right, rolling on, San Francisco travels to Carolina and just blasts the Panthers 37-15. Jeff Wilson, never heard of him? Well, get used to him. He's the latest in a string of nothing running backs that the 49ers somehow use with success for like 6 weeks probably until the next thing comes along. It's just it is the life cycle of 49ers running backs. He had 74 yards last week, 120 this week. It is the 49er way. Meanwhile, Baker Mayfield continues to be really bad. He has a pick six, third down conversion. He goes 3 of 15 on the day. And then the Panthers fired Matt Rhule. They also fired Phil Snow, which the defense hasn't been terrible. Also, if you were 5 games away from firing Matt Rhule, just fire him in the offseason and get somebody in there. It's just stupid to bring a guy into a season with that short of a leash. But I've seen a lot of people talking about what the Panthers should do. Should they sell, Christian McCaffrey, DJ Moore, Brian Burns? And I'll say this. You might want to sell off guys like DJ Moore. He's on a second contract. He's unhappy. Maybe you sell off Christian McCaffrey on a second contract, injury prone. Don't sell off these defensive players. Defensive tackle Derek Brown, Brian Burns on the edge, J.C. Horn, Jeremy Chin. There is talent on that D. And if I'm the Panthers, I'm using that talent, and I'm going to use it to go attract DeMeco Ryans this offseason, because he's the guy that I would be eyeing to come in and to get this team turned around.
I like that. That's definitely a good name to throw out there. I always lean offensive coordinator, especially because I think Carolina is going to probably draft a quarterback very high in the draft next year. I think it's probably very likely that C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young will be the quarterback of the Panthers next year. So I always tend to lean going and getting an offensive-minded guy. I don't know what that is right now. Is that Shane Steichen? Is that Ken Dorsey from the Bills? Is that Bieniemy? I don't know. I'm struggling to think of offensive-minded guys.
Can you imagine Sean Payton in Carolina?
That already got brought up. Yeah, I mean, the problem is the Saints have to agree to it, and they're going to want compensation for that. And if it's within the division, I imagine they'd want an insurmountable amount for Sean Payton to go to Carolina. That's why I think the Dallas plan is a bit more likely, which doesn't look great right now because Dallas is 4-1. But I think that was the plan for Sean Payton.
Yeah. So I'm generally on the offensive-minded guy train, almost always. But DeMeco Ryans has just done an incredible job. Mm-hmm. I feel like there could be some merit to just bringing in DeMeco Ryans, get this elite defense, and go hire a good play caller to work with your quarterback, and knowing that the defense is going to do their part. This team can win games if you do your part, and then you'll get your shot somewhere as a head coach. So it's intriguing. I think DeMeco Ryans gets a job this offseason. Heck, he could have had one last season if he wanted it. He turned the Vikings down. I don't know if he would go to the Panthers, but it would be intriguing, I would think, to coach a defense with such talented pieces.
Yeah, for sure. I think Carolina is one of those teams where as soon as they get a quarterback, they're going to figure out how to be a 7+ win team right away. Like, I don't think it's going to be a Jets situation where a rookie quarterback comes in and they win 2 or 3 games. Like, I think they will be competitive right away once they figure out how to get even a semi-competent quarterback in there. Because we saw it with Teddy Bridgewater. They were competitive in almost every game when Teddy Bridgewater was there, because at least they had a somewhat competent level starting QB. We haven't seen that last year with Darnold, and then obviously this year with Baker thus far.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. Dallas travels to Los Angeles and they beat the Rams 22-10. Cooper Rush now 4-0 as a Cowboys starter this season. He didn't play well in this game. He only threw for 102 yards, but the Cowboys defense carried the day. They held the Rams to 10 points, and they scored a touchdown on their opening drive via a strip sack. So their defense almost outscored the Rams' offense. Matthew Stafford fumbled twice in this game. He threw an interception. The Rams' offense has scored 1 touchdown in the last 9 quarters. Now they have the Panthers coming up and then a bye, so they've got a little bit of time to try to figure it out. But they don't have a lot of time. Meanwhile, this Cowboys defense is for real. Like, they've allowed exactly 1 touchdown per game this season. They're 6th in DVOA. They're 4th in passing DVOA, and they're headed into a big matchup with the Eagles where the defense may need to carry the day again with Dak Prescott's status still up in the air.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Rams, and I think their offseason and their season is defined by the moment that they were ready to sign Von Miller, and the Bills swooped in and offered him an exorbitant contract right before they were about to sign him. He goes to Buffalo. They decide to use that money to get Allen Robinson, who's been an absolute zero for them. The worst signing of the offseason by far so far is Allen Robinson when you consider the amount of money that they guaranteed and how prohibitive it is to get rid of him over the next 3 years. He will be on the Rams even if he doesn't get open, like he hasn't been all year long. And that's what it comes down to. Cooper Kupp is the only weapon that Matthew Stafford has in this offense. They don't have Robert Woods anymore, obviously. They don't have Odell anymore, obviously. They use Skowronek way too much. They try to get Allen Robinson involved. It fails. Cooper Kupp, they obviously, the other defense knows everything is centered around Cooper Kupp. The Rams have serious problems, and I don't think they're fixable in season. Even with how good Sean McVay is, even with how good Stafford, Kupp, Donald, and Ramsey are, the Rams have serious problems, and I don't think they're fixing them. On the other side of the ball, the Cowboys, I think, are one of the 2 best teams in the NFC, and we're going to find out if that's first or second this weekend. If they beat the Eagles with Cooper Rush, their backup in the game, I think they're the favorites in the NFC.
Yeah. Micah Parsons, he's just a monster. Like, I don't know. It might be early. I don't know if it's crazy to say that he's the best defensive player in the NFL. Like, the impact he made in that game far surpassed the impact Aaron Donald made. He is a game wrecker. He had 6 pressures, 2 sacks, 27.6% pass rush win rate. And you know what? He also dropped into coverage, and he looked pretty good doing that. He's just a total game wrecker.
He's definitely playing better than Donald right now this season. I'd probably still go with Donald because it's such a large sample size with him. But, yeah, I mean, Parsons is absolutely in the conversation. I mean, he's probably the leading candidate for Defensive Player of the Year right now, I would imagine. So the most wrong take of mine this offseason was the regression that I thought Dallas would have, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They had incredible turnover luck last year. They've continued that a bit, and they've also just gotten better. I mean, Diggs has been better as a corner. Parsons has taken a step towards being, a legend. He's on Lawrence Taylor trajectories. So I think Parsons is the type of guy where turnover regression doesn't matter when you have a guy like that. And Dallas, they come into a game against Philadelphia on Sunday Night Football. Not a great time for us to be having the O-line issues that we're having with Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence coming to town.
Yeah, the Eagles' offensive line health will be paramount in this game. So moving on, we've got 2 games left. Let's get into Sunday Night Football. Cincinnati at Baltimore. Baltimore wins 19-17. They take sole possession of the lead in the AFC North. Ravens were up 10 in the first half, and they narrowly avoided losing yet another double-digit lead. Lamar didn't have his best game. He notably missed on some deep throws, 2 back-to-back that both could have been touchdowns. But for a change, the defense came through, and Justin Tucker hits a 43-yard field goal to win the game. This was his 61st consecutive make in the fourth quarter or in overtime. And I don't know if you saw the plotting. They plotted, like, what yard line percentage the ball went through, and they said that, like, if the basically it was so dead down the middle that if the goalpost was like a yard wide, it would have still been a make. So that's just insane. For the Bengals, what are you doing with Zach Taylor? He adds nothing to this team. We said last year during the regular season they needed to move on, that they needed to collapse so they would get rid of him. But then they went to the Super Bowl where he was an active detriment to the team. What is the play calling to try a reverse pass to the quarterback on 2nd and goal, and then on 4th and goal try a shovel pass? Like, it's just awful. The Ravens have one of the worst defenses in the league. They allow tons of explosive plays. They've given up 30 receptions of 11-plus air yards, which is tied for the most in the NFL. Cincinnati just couldn't move the ball. They couldn't push it downfield.
Yeah, this is a game I walked out feeling much worse about both teams. I think Baltimore, I confirm everything I felt before. And the concerning thing with Baltimore here is I don't know what's going on with Lamar that would cause him to miss throws like that. I know that there's been narratives about his accuracy and about his throwing of the football for a long time. I haven't seen him miss throws like that in quite some time at this point. That's pretty intermediate stuff from Lamar there. I am a little concerned at whatever's going on. I don't know if there's an injury there. I don't know if that's miscommunication, but man, those were as bad of throws as you'll see from as good of a quarterback as Lamar is. And then on the other side, Joe Burrow had one of the worst interceptions you'll see from an NFL quarterback in general in this game, where he just straight up didn't see a guy. He just absolutely missed the guy and threw it right at his numbers, basically, to the Ravens, and hand gifted them an interception. I don't feel good about either of these teams. T. Higgins is banged up for Cincy. However, both teams have, I guess, not easy matchups, but Ravens go on the road to the Giants next week. Ravens are a 5.5-point favorite in that game at the 4-1 Giants. So that shows you how much respect Vegas has for the Giants being 4-1. And then the Bengals play New Orleans on the road, and that game is, I believe, a pick'em. So it'll be interesting to see how these teams bounce back from this. These are probably the two best teams in the AFC North, and I walked out of this game thinking they both kind of stink. So the AFC North, a division that I thought was going to be really competitive. I don't know. I mean, maybe it will be still competitive, but maybe in the wrong way. Maybe competitive to get to 9 wins.
Maybe we should just offload the AFC North and the NFC North to like the Canadian Football League or something.
Hey, I still Minnesota being a 4-1. I can't figure out what they are. Because week 1 makes me. I'll always have week 1. Anytime I'm like, oh, I'm out on the Vikings, week 1's gonna pop in my head, because it's like, man, that defense that week, and they showed up offensively and they put it all together and they did it for 4 quarters. Like, that week's gonna show up in my head for the rest of the year and completely screw my mind up on Minnesota. Same way, if anytime I get in on Minnesota, I'm just gonna remember how stupid I felt for thinking the Vikings were gonna beat us in week 2. Because anytime he gets to a big spot, it's still Kirk Cousins.
Let me ask you a question that leads into our next game. Who is the better team? The 4-1 Vikings or the 1-4 Raiders?
I think the Vikings. I do think the Vikings, because I do think the Raiders have some legitimate concerns, especially on defense. But yeah, it's not by a wide margin here. It's definitely not by a wide margin. The Vikings, man, there's like 5 or 6 teams that I just have absolutely no read on. I'd throw the Vikings, the Bears, the Patriots, the Chargers, the Browns. Those are teams that I don't know what's going on with those teams on a week-to-week basis.
The Raiders have a point differential of -5, and they're 1-4. Then you got the Giants and the Vikings are 4-1 with point differentials of +10 and +13. Like, it's just crazy. But you look at, so the Raiders lose this game 29-30. I'm sorry. I apologize for those of you that drafted Travis Kelce in the first or second round of a fantasy draft. He's held to only 25 yards on the day. Wait, what's that? Oh, producer's telling me in my ear he had 25 yards but 4 touchdowns. So congratulations if you drafted Travis Kelce in the second round of your fantasy draft. Just a crazy game there for Kelce. 25 yards and 4 touchdowns. The Raiders are up 17-0 in this one. and they blew the lead without committing a turnover. That's phenomenal. I don't know how you blow that lead and you don't turn the ball over. 11 penalties for 99 yards certainly hurt them. It all goes down. What the whole conversation boils down to is the referendum on analytics. That's what everybody wants to talk about. Andy Reid scores the touchdown to go up 7. He goes for 2 instead of kicking the extra point. Love that call. Your kicker's terrible. Go for 2. They don't get it. It's a 7-point game. Then the Raiders score. They decide to go for 2 with 2 minutes left, or with 4 minutes left. Go for 2 in the lead with 4 minutes left. And I'm going to be honest, I don't hate it. I'm not saying I love it or I would have done it. I don't hate it. If you get it, you can win with a stop. If you don't get it, the Chiefs are in a place where they are likely to play more passive, which is exactly what they did. Do you think the Chiefs punt that ball on 4th and 3 if it's a tie game? I kind of don't think they do. And so you can look at it and you can say this sort of worked. They got the ball back. So they gave themselves a chance to win if they got it. They still got the ball back and had a chance to win. So I didn't hate it. I guess all that to say, I didn't hate the call. I don't know that I would have made it, but I didn't hate the call. I saw the idea behind that. That 4th and 1 at the end was awful, though. It's 4th and 1. How do you have your 3 routes are all like vertical routes, and then even just the execution of the 2 guys, Devontae Adams and I think it was Hunter Renfrow, running into each other, the ball just falls to the turf. That you're telling me that's the best play you had in the playbook on 4th and 1?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you on the Chiefs' point. I feel so passionately about the fact that if you score a touchdown to go up 7, you always go for 2 to go up 9. I don't care what point of the game it is. I would do that at every point of the game. You try to make it a 2-possession game at all costs, no matter what. So I totally agree with Kansas City going for that decision, even though it hurt me, which I'll talk about in a second. But the Raiders, obviously, that's the more controversial one, I think. They go for 2, down 1 with 4 minutes left. I'll tell you what, at the time, I really hated it. I didn't see why you do that. And I would understand it if there's a minute and 14 seconds left and you're figuring out, like, man, they're going to get this field goal anyway. I might as well give us a chance here. I understand why they did it. I definitely wouldn't have made the decision, and especially once you laid it out there, I can understand it a little better than I did beforehand, and it obviously almost worked out. I definitely judged the decision pretty hard at the time. But what I wanted to talk about, I have a positive story for myself and a bad beat for myself in this game. The positive story, I was down 70 in a fantasy matchup with Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. They scored 71.
Oh, man.
So I won that matchup. That's my positive story. Now for the bad beat. My bet last night was Chiefs team total over 30.5.
Oh,
If the Chiefs would have just taken the extra point, they would have scored 31, and I would have cashed that bet. They score 30, and I lose on a half. And by the way, I've lost on the Chiefs team total over by a half point at least like 6 times in the Patrick Mahomes era. You'd think, as a Patrick Mahomes, apologist like I am, that he'd do me a favor, but that's not the case.
See, this is why Patrick Mahomes isn't a great quarterback.
Yeah,
good quarterbacks win. Great quarterbacks cover. Got to get it. So I've got a Patrick Mahomes stat for you, though. So Patrick Mahomes passed Troy Aikman on the career touchdown passes, throwing his 166th touchdown pass in Week 5 of his 5th year as a starter. Troy Aikman was a starter for 12 seasons. Just crazy what Patrick Mahomes has been able to do. Just phenomenal.
Don't tweet that at Troy Aikman. He'll have a meltdown on Twitter about it. Someone did that last year about some average quarterback. I think it might have been like Derek Carr that passed him or something. It might have been like a year or 2 ago. And he lost his mind. And it was the same thing. It was like Derek Carr did this in 7 years and you played 12, and he lost his mind. And like, yeah, if the defenses weren't allowed to touch you like they are now, then I would have had $1 million. And it's like, okay, Troy Aikman.
Yeah, there's something to be said for that, I guess. You can't, You can't touch the receivers. You can't touch the quarterback when you sack him. It's a whole thing. And That's not even getting into all the controversy in this game with roughing the passer and the blatant missed holding on Chris Jones on that last drive. But I've kind of talked myself out of referee issues on Twitter this week. I don't really want to get into it again on a podcast.
Yeah, I totally hear you. But yeah, this was one of those games where you're just reminded, like, oh yeah, Patrick Mahomes is on another level. They go on a 30-12 run here to end the game, and man, they are scary when they're going. But then they also have moments, obviously, where they're down 17-0, and it's like, man, what's going on with the Chiefs?
Somebody never taught Patrick Mahomes not to play with his food before he eats it. That's my theory.
Yeah.
The NFL is just like, we know you're going to win, just at least make it interesting for the ratings.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I think that is about going to put a wrap on our NFC. Not our NFC. I was reading the title here, the NFC Beast. It is late. This put a wrap on our NFL Week 5 review show. Mark, before we get out of here, do you have any final takes, final thoughts you want to fire off that you didn't get a chance to?
Go Sixers, go Phils, go Birds. As Nick Sirianni said, I said it at the top, great time to be a Philadelphia sports fan. I'm overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed with Philadelphia sports emotion. Phillies get their win in Game 1 today in the NLDS. Stupid MLB putting it at 107 during a work day. Game 2 at 4:37 tomorrow. At least it's a little better. But man, having playoff baseball by day, and then every Sunday I got the Eagles to look forward to. Man, I could definitely get used to this, and we have the Sixers coming around the corner. So for what I lost, it's funny. A couple of weeks ago, I was saying, "Oh, you'll get a more focused Mark on the podcast because Notre Dame, they stink this year. I can put them to the side." Well, Notre Dame's kind of picked up the slack. They've put the pieces together the last couple of weeks, so kind of back fans of them a little bit. And then obviously, like I said, the Phillies and Sixers. So definitely pumped up. Tune into the Tough Cover Radio Show Saturday 11 to 1 on the Gambler. Plugs at Mark Henry Jr. _ on Twitter. I'm tired. It's late. I'm tired.
All right. My final thought is that football is the one true sport and no other sports matter. Don't cheat on football with any other sport. I don't care if it's MLB playoffs. I don't care if basketball is starting. Football is the one true sport, the one sport to rule them all. And I will not be cheating on football with anything else. I won't be cheating on the NFL with college football much longer either, but we don't want to talk about OU.
We don't want to talk.
To do that. So thank you guys for joining us for episode 75 of Chalk Talk. If you enjoy what you heard on the show, and we know that you do, make sure you smash that subscribe button. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episode. 5-star rating and reviews on Apple Podcasts are always much appreciated. You can follow us on Twitter. Mark is at Mark Henry Jr. I'm at _TPL. I'll have some All-22 videos filtering out tomorrow. I've got 1 or 2 up today. It'll be a slower week for me on Twitter with my kids home on fall break. But you can keep an eye out for those. I'll be back in the full swing of things next week. So from me, from Mark, from the Painted Lines, we will see you guys next time.